Hi, everybody. I'm live. Just let me know I'm okay and everything, and we'll get started. What we'll get started on, I'm not quite sure. It's a bit late, and this is a bit of a casual stream, bit of a relaxed one, because I had a bit to do today, and then I had a massive meal, a little bit on the later side. I spent a while cooking that, spent a while eating it, and then I was just kind of comatose. And so I didn't really get to prep, to be honest with you. Thanks for the 5x5 there, Chopper. I didn't really get to prep all that much. And actually, I didn't even get to look that much on what's going on online today, the kind of daily churn of news or whatever. Now, I am maybe going to be joined by, I'm just looking here at, or joined by the last true Gael. And I just want to get his thoughts on a few things and just have a little chat. In terms of news, while last true Gael's kind of doing his thing, let's see here. I just found this interesting. The National Party shared this tweet here. They said a functional level of xenophobia, which xenophobia is distinct from racism. I don't know what that word actually means exactly, but what they mean is a little bit of protectiveness of your own, that kind of thing. And I'm just looking up what xenophobia means exactly. I know they were using that word kind of tongue in cheek. Yeah, anyway, and I'm pretty sure this is a new National Party account because they did get banned. So I'm just assuming it's them. If it's not, they can let me know. And if I'm wrong about that, I'll apologize and correct the record here. But it's a good point. Because what you have here, the point is that Western Irish communities, which are often holiday home escapes for people, are being used by basically rich people. I mean, they're not all seriously rich, but actually, I'm just going to bring in Last True Gael now. I've never done this. I've never added someone mid. Hello.
Oh yeah. Is my sound coming in? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Just letting you know you're live now as well. Not that you'd say anything untoward if you weren't live, but I'm just letting you know I'm on now. But how are you?
Perfect. Not too bad. No, not too bad. Thank you for inviting me on.
No bother. Thank you for coming on. I was just telling the audience there, or people watching, that I ate too much and didn't really prepare anything anyway. So it's good to have someone to kind of steer the ship with me here, because I don't have any big presentation. I was just looking at the. Did you see the National Party's post about, or generally this kind of news about, how you say, people going to the west of Ireland to their holiday homes? What are your thoughts on that? Now, have you seen that? It's kind of a Irish controversy at the moment, but do you have thoughts on it? Now, have you seen it?
To be honest, I only heard of it in the past in the past couple of minutes. So
yeah,
is it what, like guys from like D4 Dublin heading down to their holiday homes and being kicked out? Is that it, or
yeah, exactly?
Like,
Yeah, I can
what's
imagine.
going on there?
I can imagine it's a lot of that, and now the Gardaí have said that you can't move and you can't drive around the place. They're doing checkpoints, so a lot of people now are stuck at the holiday homes. I would say as well. But I'd say it's the type of people, like, you don't have to be crazy rich. There was a generation there where a lot of people actually ended up with these homes, and it's such a silly concept in a way. And I'm sure there's bound to be someone watching who might have one themselves. But to me, it's the kind of you have a lot of spare cash. Maybe a lot of the D4 ones. They have, the ones who drive around in Discoveries and or a lot of them have Land Rover Defenders done up to the nines that they drive around town all day. And I think in the back of their mind, they have this kind of idea that one day the apocalypse will come and I'll get to use all this stuff. I have all this, loaded up with petrol and all this kind of stuff, extra petrol tanks. That's what I would do if I had shitloads of money. I would get paranoid and try prepping. It's very male instinct as well. But I'd say they never factored in the account that the people in their escape home that they have would want them to just fuck off. It's
yeah. And even the fact that when you get down to those kind of rural areas, those people are a lot more kind of, tribal and kind of community based and all that kind of thing. And when you've got a big virus kind of running around the place, they're just not going to. They're not going to tolerate it. I mean, I even remember like Achill Island. I think they shut off their whole tourist industry thing, the kind of ferry going back and forth between them. Now, I mean, that is kind of fair enough to some degree, because a lot of these areas are just like, they have much older populations and they're going to be much more vulnerable to this anyway. But it's still a very very interesting development, because I remember someone posted up on Facebook like a bit of footage of like people just big traffic congestion going into a lot of these kind of rural areas around like Dingle, for example. You know, people just absolutely trying to get out there to their kind of holiday homes before the kind of like we can arrest you for this kind of laws came into effect. It's very, very interesting. Like,
yeah, and it's a lot of locals out in the west have a point in that the Dublin or Eastern area, basically Dublin, is the highest infected part of the country, and I don't think that's just a feature of the high population by itself. Like, it's proportionally higher as well. I think there's a greater density of cases in Dublin, so people don't want these dubs coming down with their kids running up and down to the shop every day, making the shopkeepers, potentially if the shopkeeper gets it, the shopkeeper's mother gets it, and how quick is it going around the town at that point? I think it would be much nicer for people in a town like that to say, listen, there's this global pandemic going on. We would like if no one came in and no one left our little town, because it's very easy to monitor. It's harder for a city. We don't need Gardaí or whatever. We know who everybody is. So we could very easily ride this thing out by just nobody coming into contact with anybody from outside for ages, and we'd be fine. And these dubs will mess it up. But it's just National Party posted some stuff here. Like, there was a sign in somewhere, you can see Ennistimon and Ennis, you could probably see it in your screen here as well, and it says, if you don't live here, don't be here. But it's interesting that much of the mainstream will get in on that. I suppose you could say it's different to the asylum centre thing. Like you mentioned, ACL. I follow a few ACL accounts from back when they had their asylum woes, and some of those same accounts are posting now being like, we don't want these D4 heads coming here making us sick. And they're kind of getting away with it. But if you were to say, I don't want Albanian drug traffickers potentially trying to pimp my daughter out, which is not a conspiracy theory, that's a real threat. Like, I've seen that. They're not allowed to say that, but they are allowed to be afraid of the pandemic. It's just, but it is the same instinct.
Yeah. No, I mean, exactly. Like, I mean, it is actually kind of a good point, though. Like, it just at the end. No, sorry. Just that last sentence, it kind of said that, like, too bad it takes a crisis to remind people of that. A functioning level of xenophobia can be a healthy thing. I mean, that's exactly true, because if you don't have that level of kind of maybe small degree xenophobia, then people can just kind of walk all over you, and then the whole thing inevitably collapses after a while.
Yeah, and like, if you were in a Chinese village or rural, I mean, I just think it's so mad. Like, the idea that if you're in some Chinese, very rural, off the grid kind of Chinese place, you and me and like 100 other Irish men just kind of dropped off by a bus, and all of that. And the fact that the locals were uncomfortable, they weren't allowed to be uncomfortable. I'd be the first person to say, listen, these guys are well within the rights to be uncomfortable. This is weird as fuck. And the fact that like they're saying they don't want it and they're being overruled. Honestly, if I was the asylum seeker there, I'd be like, can you guys please not work anything else out? I'd probably just go home and face the music, whatever it is. Fucking hell. Wouldn't want that. But yeah, I don't know. That just triggered my mind there on the asylum thing. I just had a few tabs open there. I mean, Debenhams closed. I don't think there's much we can particularly say about that. Debenhams have closed their doors. I wonder, it says that that's the first major casualty of the pandemic. I mean, it's probably a casualty of Amazon to a large extent as well, Yeah,
I mean, from what I've heard from a few people kind of more who are into that kind of like what Debenhams sell, Debenhams has been kind of struggling for the past few years anyway.
Yeah.
The more kind of concerning, maybe, or interesting thing is that, like, if you take a look at maybe kind of central bank data, I think it's central bank data, right? But it'll be it's in relation to liquidity, what your average small medium enterprise has in terms of liquidity and how long they can survive. And typically, on average, in Ireland, it's only about a month's worth. So we're about 2 weeks into this lockdown. So, and give it another 2 weeks, and this economic decline is going to start accelerating in a big way, because a lot of these businesses simply are just not going to have the funds or the backup to get through this.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see like a lot of larger companies or a larger bunch of corporations being fine with that to some degree, but like this is going to wipe out a lot of small to medium-sized businesses all over the country. Like,
Yeah, it's
and
gonna
it's
like
going to happen within the next few weeks, like the next couple of weeks anyway.
It's going to be very interesting to watch. It reminds me of the likes of Ryanair in the airline industry. You know, a lot of these we're seeing like every couple of months in the British-Irish kind of realm anyway, and across Europe, a lot of these airliners going bust, and people like Ryanair basically have a year's worth of, like, they have hoarded up fuel, they have this, that, and the other, lots of liquidity going on, and so a thing like this ultimately. I mean, I'm sure they don't enjoy this happening, but long term it works for them, because their raison d'etre is to just clear every other airline out of the market, and them being the most anti-fragile one, I suppose. But, you know, it's worth thinking about this stuff in a way, and I don't mean to beat the same old drum, but, you know, just because you're looking at this stuff and being cautious about the effect it could have and worried about it and how it could be to the benefit of the powerful doesn't necessarily mean. That's my issue. Is like, you know, you can make that argument without saying, because I have this general feeling about that, I have to try and assert that from the day one, the whole thing was a finely oiled plan. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, you could, you know, the two don't necessarily square up. Like, I wonder about that.
I mean, like the thing is too, like a lot of people are going to gain from this. Like, you know, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or excuse me, certain food companies or whatever, a lot of people are going to a small selection of people within your society or a group are going to do well or do comparatively well after this. I mean, not even necessarily like pharmaceutical companies. I mean, even stuff like if you're a government employee, like and you're the last guy left standing because your job is way more safe and you've got a pension and all that kind of stuff. You might not have been that special about 3 or 4 months ago, but if half your friends have lost their jobs, suddenly your job is way more special. So even not only in the kind of raw like pharmaceutical, they do better, or some lab which produces medical masks, like they might be doing much better, but there's going to be a lot of people down the line who will do comparatively better, and that comparatively better will put them up a lot further as a result. So that's kind of an interesting.
Put them further up, which up just the pecking order, the economic pecking order, you mean, or?
Yeah, I mean the economic pecking order, the kind of, I suppose, status pecking order. A lot of different things like that. I mean, like if you're just a normal government assistant AO or AP, and you're on like 30, 40 to 60K, suddenly your job is going to be way better now, because you're not gonna lose it, and you're not gonna have pay cuts in the same way that a lot of people in the private sector would have.
And it does become it becomes a little bit more of an elite job, whereas it would have been just mediocre in the past. That's true. It's a very strange world, because what are people going to do when everybody's going bust? I find if you go around any urban environment at the moment, or any environment really, I find there's this strange kind of like numb, semi-utopian, semi-almost dystopian vibe. I don't know, like you will see people out, you know, there's more room on the streets, everybody's airy and casual because a lot of people aren't working. Or if they are, they're working from home, and it almost feels like this kind of peaceful kind of utopia, but then there's a sinister feeling of authority behind it all as well, you know, of like, so, you know, if my point being, like, if you just woke up randomly, like kind of Terminator style, didn't know where you are, and you were just figuring it out, you'd be like, it is quite pleasant, but then I notice everybody's staying away from each other. It's strange as well. And that's the attitude now, because everybody's just coasting on fumes. But like you say, in 2-3 weeks' time, eventually the kind of, I don't know, can't think of the analogy. The fat lady has to sing, something like that. Eventually the rubber has to meet the road. That's the one. And what happens then? I mean, government bailout, maybe. What do you think it'll look like in 3 weeks' time?
Yeah, it's hairy. I mean, like, a lot of businesses are going to go under. I don't know how we're going to afford this. I mean, like, we started issuing all these kind of the the National NAMA, the National Treasury Management Agency, they issued a 7-year bond, and they managed to generate about 6 million of it. Sorry, 6 billion, and they were able to get about 0.2468 interest. But like the fact that we're issuing bonds that big, and between the fact that like we're I think this recent COVID social assistance, or whatever you want to call it, between those combined, like we're going to have a huge deficit at the end of this. I mean, the central bank projected like a 15 to 20 billion deficit by the end of the year. I mean,
and do you know what our deficit was, let's say, a month ago or whatever? Because we're known to have this big debt, and I'm completely ignorant on it. Do you know what our deficit would have been going into this?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between the budget deficit and the actual national debt. In terms of our in terms of our actual budget, I think we were running a 1 or 2 billion No, it was a 2 billion surplus.
Okay.
And then what this is going to lead into, if you have a projection of 3 months and then you're 5 billion down, and then if you're issuing all these bonds to try and raise all this money, but the central bank had this at about like. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, go on. No. Go on. You're on a roll there.
But
Central bank.
Central bank's projections are between like 15 and 20 billion. I mean, that's, if anything, that's even on the conservative side, because I was taking a look even at that report, and that was assuming some level of consistent economic activity. But if you've got like if you've got a set of businesses there, like, and they've only got about a month's worth of liquidity, and they all start collapsing, then that's just going to set a kind of cascading non-linear effect throughout your country, basically. And that can blow up in a big way, and I don't know how we're going to get the money to kind of.
That's a complete transformation. So it's kind of like your weekly household budget compared to your, your mortgage and your debt. That would be national debt versus your like working budget. I mean, if that analogy holds true, then what a household person would do going over their budget for a little while, in their weekly budget, would be to just throw it on the credit card, remortgage the house, kind of, and it transfers over into your more longer term debt, i.e. national debt. Like, which would the equivalent of that would be borrowing off the IMF or something. I don't know these things, but can you see something like that?
I think it could be about like borrowing off the IMF, or it could be like issuing more and more bonds. But the problem is with a lot of this is that like, are people willing to buy your stuff? And if they're not, and if people are not willing to lend to you, and especially because coming into this, about 25% of our tax receipts came from corporations, and if a lot of them go down, and some of them seem to be suffering quite badly right now, where are we going to get that money from? I mean, our economy is, there's not a lot of kind of natural resources based there. There's a lot of kind of multinational backups, and there's a lot of it is also built up on small to medium businesses, which are going to get wiped out pretty quickly, unfortunately, as horrible as that is to say.
Yeah, the small medium businesses is what worries me. I mean, the national, tax receipts from the multinationals, like, I know that you have to be a realist and accept the fact that we do live off that a bit, but as a kind of a national populist or whatever, part of me does, and it might be the silly idealist, but have a problem with them in the first place, so I don't know, it is, maybe it's kind of form of accelerationism, I don't know, but it's the small businesses shutting really bothers me. And in terms of how we pay the bills, I don't know, I mean, the bills ultimately are the social welfare and the healthcare service and some other bits and pieces like that. It's mainly social welfare, pensions, and healthcare. Pretty much, like, those are the big staples, and plenty other things, like. But those are the things that require like a pretty spicy GDP at all times to keep them afloat, because they are ever growing and bottomless kind of pits. I don't know. Like, someone like Stefan Molyneux or whatever knows or talks about a lot of this stuff, and to me, it's kind of just not my. I don't understand it or pretend to, but it is going to be transformative and something. I mean, it is going to be absolutely transformative in a way that the recession or whatever wasn't. And I don't know what we're looking at in a month's time at all. And I don't know. It is worth plenty thinking though. You did say, I was chatting to you earlier, or we were chatting just over on another platform there, and you were talking about. Do you mind me bringing that up? Right, your point a while ago.
No, work away, whatever you want to.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so you were saying, yeah, no, it wasn't exactly like, private information or anything. Just curious. So basically, the whole idea that, like, could this be a bit of a con, a bit of a chance or an opportunity for various state powers and actors to take opportunity of a crisis, or so somewhere between that, or it could have been a little bit planned or whatever, and I'm just interested. And it sounds like that was just a thought that's just occurring to you and you're just kind of working on it. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, when I kind of say plan, I don't necessarily mean there's kind of a big kind of conspiracy or anything like that. I guess it's kind of more like that, like a lot of these guys. I mean, even take something like Simon Harris. Simon Harris is a guy who, I mean, I don't know much about him. Maybe he's sound, maybe he's not sound. But the reality is, like, he's a relatively inexperienced guy who got an 80 grand a year job with no trades, no plumbing, no STEM skills, no entrepreneurial skills. And so because of that, he's in a much higher place maybe than he probably should be. And between the fact of the government's popularity collapsing, I'm just using Simon Harris as an example here, by the way. Between the two no confidence votes, and between the collapse of Fine Gael as a party, he's never really, or he's going to struggle to get that kind of opportunity again. And then the coronavirus happens, and then suddenly people are scared, and then you have the government kind of acting on this, that, and the other, and then you have the whole, he's playing a blinder kind of phenomenon. And suddenly there's an opportunity for him to maybe do a bit better out of this, or to hold on to his position within the government or within society, or whatever kind of status level he has as a result of that. And that can kind of converge on even stuff like hate speech laws. So I was kind of maybe talking a bit there is that, like, excuse me. So like we've been seeing a lot of these kind of journalists kind of going like, oh, stay away from WhatsApp and focus on the Irish Times, or stay away from this, and trust the HSE, even though they've been blatantly making contradictory statements about all their numbers and
wear a mask, don't wear a mask. What else was there? There's the letter about the school that had COVID. That was real letter, and that wasn't real letter. Was it? Should you take anti-inflammatories? You should, and you shouldn't. Hydroxychloroquine, yay, nay. But believe us, don't go online. Okay, so is that basically? Do you have any more to that? So it's kind of like the WhatsApp thing, the hate speech thing, the centralization of where you get your information for all faith in the state. Harass anybody who walks outside the house, like, or really just carry on with your theory. I mean, is there? And I'm not trying to call it a conspiracy theory, any of that. I'm taking this like legitimately or whatever. Is that the bones of it, basically? Like that Fine Gael will use this crisis as an opportunity to and in doing so they'll, I don't know, turn the screw on their pre-existing agenda, or what are you thinking?
Basically just an opportunity to kind of like get themselves forward and kind of hold on a little bit longer. So I mean, even like that's what the hate speech laws were essentially. The hate speech laws were kind of brought forward because it was a case of like you had all these kind of government guys had the easy gig doing this, that, and the other, and then suddenly they come to realize that there's a opposing force of them, and they start kind of bringing this thing in increasingly. Now the problem is you've got a perfect excuse to bring that in even further, because you're not just able to just say, oh, we want to protect people from being hurt or one person being racist against another person. Now you can kind of say, well, your WhatsApp nonsense speech puts people's lives in danger because it caused them to do something that they didn't do. And that will allow them to kind of push forward on top of that, which means that could be a kind of a bad road for us because it's not just a hate speech thing anymore. It's a putting people's lives in danger issue.
Yeah.
And that allows them to kind of move forward with whatever momentum or kind of issue or idea that they have in their head.
Yeah.
And
so in order
that's a big concern from us. I think that's going to be a big concern for us in the next couple of months.
I
More
agree.
so than a general nationalist points, basically.
Yeah, I agree with like a lot of that in the sense that, well, I was thinking you might have meant kind of like they will use these things as almost like populist things in order to become popular with the public. But you more
yeah,
mean
that too. I mean, there's a bit of that as well, like.
But I mean, that's kind of like the playing a blinder thing, which is a question of, I mean, there is that feature of every party who seems to be in power around the world who's dealing with this is becoming more popular. The Tories, the Republicans, Fine Gael, and all that. I think it is just a feature of kind of, not to go all like whatever on it, but there is that whole thing of, I don't know, it's like a parental thing or something. People just like the idea that strong action has been taken regardless of what it is, and they want to feel like they're looked after. With Doireann Garrihy tweeting that she was in tears, because of Leo Varadkar's speech. It's a little bit hysterical. I think that's maybe as well a fear response to, something that is scary. There's this pandemic or whatever, so people get afraid, and then they have this kind of emotional outburst when they feel like somebody is taking control of the situation in some way. But the question of whether they ramp up these laws, I don't think if they like tighten up those or enforce those hate speech laws, or let's say fake news laws or whatever they want to call them, I don't think that would necessarily be them asserting their power through any kind of populism. Because I don't think if they did that, the whole country would kind of rejoice and go, oh my God, they're so brilliant. To me, it seems like that's the kind of thing that's done more quietly. So it would serve their power in terms of blunt kind of force behind the scenes by shutting people up and all that. But I don't think it would necessarily be their party platform. I mean, I've never seen Fine Gael making it their party platform to be cracking down on hate and all this left, right, centre. They usually talk about the economy and this and that and everything else. And then behind the scenes, it's kind of NGO land, a bit of tweeting here and there, but it's not really their chief. They don't run as the big anti-racist lefty party. They kind of shuck and jive on all that a little bit. So, but the question of whether they would utilize these measures now as an opportunity, and I do agree that the hate speech law thing isn't just necessarily about racism. It's always been more connected to counter-state rhetoric. If you're being anti-state, like even, in the same way as the same crowd will come down on certain Sinn Féin people and certain others, in the same way they almost come down on us. So it's not necessarily strictly about this kind of populist nationalism or racism or any of that. It's more just classic authoritarian measures to shut other people up. And the question of will they use it? I mean, I don't know. It seemed to strike you, because I've been following your thought for a while on this, and it seemed to strike you tonight as a particular kind of epiphany. Was there anything that triggered that kind of general strand of like, are we being had here? This is, it sounds like maybe you were with it a bit more for a while, and you're kind of just having an epiphany recently. Is that a fair assessment? When you just suddenly start to view something a different way, you go, fuck.
Yeah, I mean, like, there might have been a bit of that, but I guess I was just kind of watching or listening to some of Simon Harris's comments, like, and
okay.
And he kind of said something along the lines of like, this can go on for many, many weeks, and if the public don't comply, then we'll have to kind of go more seriously or work kind of more more in a more kind of authoritarian manner in relation to this. And I, yeah, I no, I mean, like you did raise a very, very good point there. But I guess it's kind of more like maybe maybe it's more kind of a backup for this hate speech laws. So like, you know, they can kind of go to people and go like, well, we're not bringing this in not just because of the fact that people are kind of saying this, that, or the other, but because of the fact that like this could get people infected or killed in a bad way. And the other thing too is that like I think Tracy O'Mahony did a good video on this. Like there's a precedent now that's been set, and my worry or my kind of concern would be that maybe something like, because this precedent of these powers have been set, you get some weirdo headbanger who identifies himself by being far right or whatever, and he does something. And then the government kind of goes, well, we have to deal with this evil far right threat. Some weird media story from some headbanger that goes viral, and then they start coming down on everyone as a result of that.
Let's absolutely hope not. I mean, no political group ever wants anything like, obviously for various reasons, don't want anything like that to ever happen. But I mean, you know, to me, the hate speech thing, I feel like is a fait accompli anyway. No, I agree this could be used, but you know, I also at the same time feel like in the absence of a crisis like this, were you to ask me, is something like this just coming down on us anyway? I would say, well, yeah, you know, pretty steadily seems to be ratcheting up. Look at what was the last one? There was a protest a few months ago. I was at the thing. And Antifa came and everything, but it was against a specific thing. What was it in? I did videos about this and everything. I've completely forgotten what it is.
Was this the one before the general election? Like it was on like the weekend before, and there's a lot of people that are going to go to it, but didn't go to it in the end because of the.
Yeah. And it was something to do with free speech live. Absolutely, it's just a surreal feeling. No memory of what it was, but it was something to do with free speech, and it was being done. I actually did like a whole video on this and everything. It was. I'm looking through my my thing here now. Absolutely no idea. Blank as a slate. But yeah, they have been basically. There have been little steps toward it steadily. So I don't know. It doesn't mean that they won't use it, but I mean, I don't know. The final question I have in my mind is kind of like, as this goes forward, if we kind of ignore it, because government propaganda and everything has a certain amount of power to it. It does. It's not to be underestimated, but there's a limit to that too. And so, independent of government propaganda, I do wonder about where it will go. Let's say as the weeks draw on, as it's extended, will it become more? Because there's the kind of faction or the mood in society of reporting on your neighbor who leaves the house to go for a jog or whatever, right? There's that whole thing of like self-enforcement kind of thing. Yeah. And then there's the other idea potentially that will grow of people kind of getting sick of it bit by bit and just going, listen, I'm out of work. You know, I was willing to abide by this for a couple of weeks, but it's just taking the piss at this point. I'd love to know where in a month's time, which direction general society, independent of propaganda or from the government or what we say or what we would like, just completely organically from society, where the mood will be pointing towards in 1 month's time, assuming these measures are still in place. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a like you were saying before, like there's this kind of half sort of utopian kind of feel to this, and that half utopian kind of feel from this is kind of like you have all these kind of lads who are working kind of, you know, the 9 to 5 wage job, and they're kind of like, oh, I've got a little bit of a holiday and it's nothing to do with me, and maybe they're kind of enjoying that a little bit. But by the time this kind of ramps up and you're kind of stuck inside, or maybe you're alone and you don't have a family or a bunch of friends surrounding you, or maybe you're a massively extroverted person and you need to be talking to people. By the time that kind of wears off, and by the time, you know, there's a sort of kind of an uncertainty that this is not going to end, and then you have the economic effects on top of that, I think a lot of people are going to start to get a bit uncomfortable pretty quickly. And I wonder too, because I mean, I don't know. Did you see that stream with the with Justin Barrett and Don and Critiqued?
No, I haven't watched it. You've watched it, have you?
Yeah, no, like I saw a bit, but
Yeah.
like
Tell me about it.
it is just kind of a comment that that Barrett made,
Mhm.
and Justin Barrett was talking about the fact that, like, the next stage on top of that would be like, if things got that kind of, people were kind of just actively like just working against the guards, that you might have army fellows on the street, and then things
Yeah.
get a bit more awkward then. And
Yeah, they do get a bit more awkward for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like this could deteriorate pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I've been noticing a thing of like the emergency services, police and ambulances and stuff going around the place, ringing their sirens and putting on their flashy lights every now and again. And for a while I wasn't sure, but at this point I'm completely convinced it's a measure. It's a kind of a just, and you saw it from the start as well. The guards just kind of walking around aimlessly for the most part. It's just
Yeah.
a kind of a visual reminder that the state is still here, by the way. Don't go looting, don't go getting ID, don't even get the psychological idea of the concept that the state has gone away. It's very much still here, and that's what that little siren in your window once in a while kind of reminds you of. But again, my issue with this stuff is like, you can talk about this at the level and I'm not trying to police anyone else's discourse. It's just my opinion. You can talk about it at the level we're talking about, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it is all some kind of massive, from top to bottom, from start to finish, kind of play against us with, where it's very much conspired in. To me, that's just so unlikely. And I often see people making the jump in language from one thing to another. It's like, well, and people will be sick of me saying this, but it's like, it really could just be, it potentially could be the virus is what it is. It's all good. It's whatever. And then the state are just reacting to it fecklessly because the state are less competent than people imagine. But in doing so, they're reacting in a kind of increasingly authoritarian and desperate way. And like you say, army on the street eventually. People will get sick of it. I think that's an interesting thing. I don't like any of this happening, whatever. But as a kind of a radical, I don't know, it being in a kind of an outsidey politics type of thing, to me, there's a part of me that, like, it's regrettable and all that. But if it has to happen, I do kind of like sit back and watch, like, and stroke my chin a little bit. I don't know if you do. The idea of the army coming out and kind of society starting to fray a little bit around the edges. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, kind of on my own end, I'm not saying this is like a conspiracy or made up or anything like that.
No.
I'm just saying that, like, in situations like this, people can benefit and they will look to benefit, and they'll kind of look to act in that kind of way. I mean, even stuff like another kind of thing too is that, like, if you're a government, you have a economic and government and social incentive to not let people panic, basically. So I wonder, and this is where that lecturer in UCC was taking the RIP data, and this is something I think we were talking about looking into before. I was talking about looking into before. I wanted to kind of gauge at some level if the deaths that are being attributed to COVID are being under or over reported. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up in a kind of a half situation where it's kind of like, the kind of deaths stay relatively stable, but then people start talking about, like, I knew someone in hospital who got it and who suffered really, really bad from it. And more people have these anecdotal stories which don't match up with the actual HSE numbers. And maybe the reason for that is because the government simply don't want to cause people to panic and panic shop or go out on the streets.
I very much agree with that. And just as a note as well, I kind of counter signal the whole conspiracy theory thing a lot, but in a way I don't, because, for example, if there's someone out there who's logically, or even if it's a bit kind of out there and they're just kind of speculating a bit, but they have this speculation, they kind of go, my take on it is that it was a Chinese bioweapon and la la la. I'm very interested in that. Just as a theory, when people kind of announce that as their kind of theory, like, and they announce it in those terms, then I'm like, oh yeah, that's well interesting, because if that's true, you do want to be exploring that or whatever. a little bit. But it's just, my take is more on the, it's not an issue against that. It's just about the mixing and conflation of all these different points of view together. You kind of know what I'm getting at, but I like your point there. Like, I agree with it. It feels like maybe instead of this being something that the government are sitting around rubbing their hands thinking, this is brilliant, this is exactly what we wanted, we almost kind of semi-planned for it, and we're going to go with this and assume all this power. I think it might be more of a shit show than we imagine, because, I mean, you think about where this is going. Like, do they have an exit strategy? Do they just let it run? Like, if they just decided to do Boris Johnson's original plan and just do herd immunity, people would start dying in greater numbers. And even if there was no getting around that and that theory, because the herd immunity thing has a logic to it, but at the same time, the public aren't going to listen to that logic when you have, I mean, I would take up, see, that's the thing. If they took, for example, the herd immunity thing, and in reality there was a bit of logic to that, I have to admit, as a populist, kind of nationalist, and an enemy of the state in a certain way, I would take as much a cynical advantage of that as I could against the state. So, everybody's trying to act on this for a little bit of a power play in some way, I think. Even, you could say, the 5G people, whatever, right? They would just claim that, they would tell you, no, I just believe this theory, and I'm just trying to advance the truth as I see it. But I think that's kind of hiding the ball a little bit, because no, you have a point of view and an ideology, and it is a worldview and stuff, and you want that to have some kind of greater power in the world or whatever. It's kind of a Nietzschean thing of like will to power via your ideology, or will to ideology via power. And so, yeah, they're taking advantage of it left, right, and center as well in all sorts of ways. So the state you could see as just another actor in that sphere who are just reacting to all of this. And by virtue of doing that, yes, they will be cynical, and you end up in the same place of them trying to take advantage of an opportunity cynically, as if it were conspired in from the start. Now, it might not necessarily be, but it kind of looks like the same thing in the end anyway, because ultimately they're just dealing with a shit show, and their ultimate way of doing that, like anyone who's kind of freaking out, worried about power, worried about this and that, but they will get authoritarian. They will start to clamp down and, and put the foot on people's throats a bit more, because it's the only thing they know to do in a crisis.
And even things like you're talking even in terms of like different probability outlooks. So what I mean by that is, like, one of the things with this virus is that even if it might not be that lethal on the whole to the whole population, I mean, that in some ways, like, that mortality figure is not the correct mortality figure, because that mortality figure is matched up against the people who have been given the test and who have actually been diagnosed with COVID, rather than the true value, rather than, say, like the beta hat or whatever you want to call it. And what happens there is that because it is it's to some degree quite lethal, but not that lethal, it causes a massive influx of sick people onto your hospital system. Your hospital system collapses, your health system collapses. Everyone absolutely 100% knows what that will look like. And then your government are going to go, well, that's just going to look bad for them. And the inevitable public response is just going to be, well, you did nothing to save, the older people. Whereas if you start bringing in lockdowns and all this kind of stuff, you start slowing the whole thing down. You start injecting more uncertainty into the whole thing. And then not only are you more able to spin it, you're less able to see that really, really bad outcome happen. And so it's kind of in your interest, I suppose, to kind of act on it in that way, from a kind of a just saving your job point of view. Because if you have that kind of,
no, go on, you're on a roll.
Yeah, but if you had that, like, even that kind of herd immunity thing, like, it would be kind of much easier to see what would happen. Like, a load of people would die, and the Conservative government would get slammed for not doing anything, even though, in a weird sort of way, you could argue that that might have been the best thing to do anyway, and they would have been out in the next election, or they would have suffered a significant loss in terms of seats in the next election. You know, like I was kind of saying, a very gaining economically or gaining politically or gaining from a social point of view.
And it's almost just like not necessarily just, I know Fine Gael have their interest, but it is the state at large as well in a deeper sense, because, you know, like, you know, them screwing up on this, or if it was seen as a screw up by the public, like you let these old people die, you let the healthcare system get very collapsy, if that's a word. And you did that and it looks bad. And because Sinn Féin took advantage of it, and you and I and nationalists and all sorts of people would take advantage of it against their enemy, Fine Gael and the government and the state, that level of crisis, that level of failing would be seen not just as like a mini kind of Fine Gael at it again. It would be seen as, it would delegitimize the entire state, I think, in a kind of a slightly deeper level, and would cause a much more, what's the word, heady atmosphere politically than your average, like, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, you know, whatever. It would be, Chopper is saying I made collapsy a word, but is collapsy the word I use? Yeah, that could be a handy one going forward. There's a collapsy, you know, feeling in the air, but it's like it could delegitimize that state a bit more. And I think that's what they worry about a lot as well behind the scenes, is that, like, just, you know, so if you have two options here, let it run and do the herd immunity and the kind of more libertarian view of things. And even if it is logically more sound, even if it was, they just go, either way, you have two options. One is us asserting ourselves, one is us not asserting ourselves. So they go for the other one. And again, to accompany option B, the assertion one, the one that's happening right now, they would, I suppose, naturally have to accompany that with a little bit of propaganda. You know, the fear mongering, some people would say, and this and that, and, you know, all of the journalists, the blue ticks out there telling people to stay at home or whatever. Again, that could very easily begin to look like the accompanying propaganda of a pre-existing conspiracy. Whereas, again, it could be that, but it also, you know, you look at some, I suppose the theme I'm getting at is that, like, things can very often play out in a way that would look almost, or could be described as a plan and a well-oiled plan, but actually it's just the way things play out and the forces of, you know, survival and self-interest kind of working at work. And to me, there's just something interesting about viewing it the second way, just looking at how people are reacting and what people are doing, as opposed to just going, it's all just a plan. Yeah, because it's more interesting the first way, I think, because then you're looking, I don't know, I feel like you're looking into it a bit more realistically. But I mean, again, so the risks we have are, okay, so they do herd immunity and they get seen in a bad light, the way we're described, you've described, and I have too. The other option is the option we're in the midst of at the moment, is that they go with their plan now and it turns badly on them. I've kind of asked you this question already in another way, but how do you think this plan, as is, current option, plays out for them? If it plays out for them badly, how do you think that looks? Would you just say it's the army on the streets thing, or economic, or like, if this is going to go badly for them, how's it going to go badly?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting one. I suppose maybe the start of that would be how the health service is actually going to cope. I mean, there have been a bunch of stories coming out. Like, I mean, there's a story that came out today that, like, 70 of the staff in Cavan Hospital have been infected with this thing, and even stuff like stories of, like, that there's this interesting post on Facebook that came out about this nurse was talking about the fact that, like, a lot of kind of these admin HSE managers who had never done any kind of nursing in their lives, they were forcing people to use Galileo Irish nationalist 70, yeah. Sorry, he was just wondering what the number 70 people infected. Yeah. But basically, like, like, you also have the fact that the Maher Hospital have reported about the fact that, like,
ICUs,
their ICUs are completely full as well. Like, if you see a kind of a big if you see footage kind of left, right, and center of like the health service melting down, like that's going to be a big one, and it's going to be a big one in kind of winding up people. Or if you kind of
Okay,
get
so
to the stage where like everyone has a story of like, everyone has a granny or everyone has a dad who has been infected by this, that's where things will certainly escalate anyway.
so you could have like the chess pieces at play here are from the state's point of view is like it in terms of the option of it going badly for them, it could either go badly in the way you've just suggested, which is you didn't do enough, or it could go badly in a kind of a way via economics, via a kind of personal freedom. People start to get a little bit sweaty after a month or so. They kind of start to get sick of it. So a mix of my job, I'm stuck in the house. People starting to fray, even though they're up for it right now. They start to fray after a while, start to get angry and annoyed, and they start to get annoyed at the fact that there's no exit ramp for this visible one to them. So there's them getting angry on that scale. So you're doing too much, or there's them getting angry on you didn't do enough, as you've just outlined, or it could potentially even be such a shit show for them that it kind of ends up like both. You didn't do enough with the health service. People are dying. My granny this, blah, 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 that. Here's a video from the hospital. That looks really bad. But at the same time, it's going economically tits up as well. And it all comes down on them like that. Now, I see that kind of maelstrom of negative situation for the government as being much more likely than... So the track I was looking at there was it going badly for them, option A, option B, or both. And then there's the other completely separate branch of it going well for them. Now, the it going well for them, I can't see how that plays out at all. Now, I know you had your theory about them cracking down on various measures, but overall, I struggle to see how this is any way a good thing for them, no matter what happens.
The ICU system is going to collapse in the next few weeks. I mean, we were kind of pulling numbers on that before. They were able to add, I think they're able to convert a number of operating theaters into ICUs, as in terms of like having extra ventilation facilities and all that kind of stuff. I think right now, unless someone wants to correct me in the chat, we are on about like 160 or 170, and some people have been talking about like that hasn't been going up, but I wonder about that too, because we've had a lot of clusters break out within nursing homes, and I wonder too, is that like because of the fact that like maybe someone can correct me in the chat, but I'm fairly kind of sure that like only about 12 to 15% of people who have died of this have ended up in ICU. So that would almost kind of suggest that like a lot of people who have been infected in nursing homes and are getting palliative care. 40 clusters in nursing homes. So like if you have any kind of overload of the ICU system, and that will happen probabilistically as more people outside the nursing homes get infected, what's going to happen is those people in the kind of danger area who would have otherwise survived are not going to survive. And then the mortality rate starts spiking, and then everyone knows someone who's in a hospital who ends up dying. And then you combine that with the fact that people are melting down because they don't have a bit of extra money coming in. And maybe the Irish government can't bring in extra money because no one wants to buy our bonds, or we're 19 billion. We've got a 19 billion deficit by the end of the year. Like this could blow up badly when exactly like you said, the maelstrom of like the health service and the economic thing, and that's not good.
So it's like they have two options of reacting a lot, reacting a little, and no matter which option they pick, they'll get screwed on both ends regardless. So it's a lose-lose. That's the way I kind of see it. And if someone can convince me that the state has, clear and obvious benefit to gain from this versus a situation of normality, then I'm all ears. But it looks bad from my perspective. Looking at that, I just want to outline. No, go for it.
Even to kind of talk from a kind of a more cynical actuarial maybe point of view, more kind of older people are going to vote Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael on average, and
Oh yeah.
and they do vote in higher amounts as well, or greater amounts. So if a lot of them end up die because of this, that's gonna, it sounds morbid to say, but it is going to give Sinn Féin a bit of an advantage because their voters are younger and they're going to be more
Yeah.
likely to survive this. So that's also
Yeah.
going to hit them in a big way too.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think we might as well leave it there because we could go on for ages, but sure. It's pushing on 12 o'clock now. I just want to make two last points is first off, any final thoughts?
No, not at all. Not off the top
Okay.
of my head, no. Anyway,
just to give you the chance, just in case you got off and you were like, ah, shit, you forgot to mention something. So one thing is that I just closed a tab on the screen share that people can see there, and I just want to clarify for the people who will be like, coming up with theories. I had a page open there called Life After Hate, which I found on Twitter just before I went live. It just popped up on my Twitter for some reason. And Jesus, my homemade haircut is starting to, all respect to the person who did it, who's probably watching. But, maybe as it's grown out, I'm getting issues. Anyway, I opened this Life After Hate thing, which is one of these, like, I used to be a hater, but now I'm not type of organizations, like an ADL type thing. And because I was stuck for something to talk about tonight, I just opened that tab and I was like, fuck it, I'll just talk about that. I don't know, I'll go through that website. And then I just noticed it on the tabs visible to the audience, and I closed it. So I can imagine someone in the chat being like, he's trying to like de-radicalize himself or something, and we caught him or whatever, right? That was going to be my talking point for the night. You know the way people are like, oh, he's trying to de-radicalize everybody through his YouTube videos or something. Not that anybody here is radical, of course. Everybody watching here, as well as yourself and myself, are complete centrists, right? Straight down the middle centrists. If anybody asks me, or if we are radical, we're radical centrists. That's the official policy anyway, or official outward position. But
or it would have been kind of just average normal people like 20 years ago or 10 years ago, even, like, not even anything big like that, like,
Yeah, I made the mistake before of political positioning myself, which ended up in the Irish Times and the Demented O'Doherty accounts and all these ones still kind of try to follow me around with it, because I said I was talking to someone on Twitter. This is years ago, and they said, "Are you a right winger?" And I said, "Well, there's two versions of right wing. There's like the far like nationalist side, heavy state kind of national socialist side, basically." And then on the other side, there's the American libertarian type of thing, which is like, don't even build roads. You know what I mean? Those are very radical positions on each pole. So those would be like the poles for the right, what it is to be kind of right wing. And the guy asked me, probably trying to catch me out or whatever, but he asked me, so which one are you or whatever? And I went, well, I would be neither of those things. Like I'd be in the middle of those things as a right winger, Basically, I was trying to say I'm a centrist right winger, but the takeaway quote for the Irish Times and everybody ends up being, Garrod says he's a, I can't even say it now because they'll clip this, but says he's a national socialist, basically. So it's like, fucking hell, you're best off to just say, I'm a centrist. I'm an absolute normie centrist. I believe what everybody else does. If you're asking me my official policy or position, that's what it is. And then go from there. But so the final thing to point out to the audience, what have we got watching now? 117. So if you go to the description here, it should be there. I swear I added it while we were talking, although I'm a poor multitasker. Lads, it should be there. So I wanted to add your details to the description last year, Gael. And so for whoever's watching, sorry to waste your time now, lads, but I'm putting your Twitter on. Actually, let me put them in the chat. I think that's quicker, isn't it, for now? Because I want people to go to your page and follow you. So copy link to profile. This is going in the chat, and I absolutely demand of the audience to go subscribe to these things because it's only fair. Like, that's your thing, and then the YouTube. Yeah. You've a video on Burzum. What's that about?
Oh yeah. No. Like I was kind of saying that video. Like I'm. One of the main reasons I kind of have started a channel is because of like the kind of free the hate speech laws coming in, and I kind of wanted to say, kind of fuck that. But I'm a big music fan, so I kind of do the odd kind of music.
Yeah.
So I did a black metal review there of Burzum's album Philosophy. I don't know how.
Is a musician.
Yeah, I don't know how big.
You're talking to a Philistine here, like, so I don't know. It's black metal, is it?
I don't know exactly how much of the chat will be into black metal, but if you're kind of half into it or half kind of looking into it like that, that album is certainly one of the more interesting ones, or it's kind of the epitome of that kind of era of kind of Scandinavian black metal.
Yeah, weren't there those? What's that band? Is it Megadeth? There's the ones that were like murdering each other and stuff like that. There was
Mayhem. Yeah.
Mayhem, yeah.
Yeah,
I actually found I found a few of those songs and I really enjoyed them. I've no familiarity with that stuff, but good for exercising.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that album Philosophy in particular, it's kind of one of the kind of quirkier kind of black metal albums, I suppose. It's kind of like I don't know. I mean, really kind of a good. I was kind of half thinking of the Captain Beefheart album, Trout Mask Replica, for some reason, but like, no, that wouldn't be a good comparison. But it's a very, very interesting album. It kind of goes into the first half of the album is kind of very kind of more conventional black metal, and then the second half of it kind of goes into more kind of ambient, kind of dungeon synth, for lack of a better phrase. Someone said in the chat there, Until the Light Takes Us is great also. Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's a great album as well. The first song on that, Det Som Eganvar. Again, I'm really bad at this kind of pronunciation. Is one of the best black metal songs. Like he was good back in the day for kind of mixing up the kind of ambient stuff with the actual pure black metal stuff.
Well, I can see the chat kind of lighting up out of interest on this stuff, and it's always good to. I always love when I see people get interested and inspired by things that aren't necessarily just go on the Patriots, the Patriots and the government and migration and that stuff's all grand. I do loads of that, so I'm not pointing the finger. I'm very guilty of it, or not guilty of it. It's fine, but it's just nice when you can introduce some other things. So I think more of those videos. I think people would be well into those anyway. I'd be looking forward to them. Those kind of culture videos. I'm going to watch that Burzum video when we're done. But anyway, so I just apologize because I've been trying to do it here, but it's just giving me. It's basically failing. It's not uploading your stuff to the description, but I think people have it in the chat. And for anybody who's not watching this live, watching this in future, it will be in the description basically in about 5 minutes. So go subscribe to Last Through Gael on YouTube and follow on Twitter, and you can do the same for myself as well. So I'll basically leave it there. Thanks for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching.
Cool. Thank you for letting me join, and have a good weekend, everyone in the chat, and yourself as well.
All right, anytime, man. Take it easy. See ya. Bye, everyone.
Cool. See you in a bit. Bye.